Have a table in the corner, I can tell they're not going to spend money. The priority go on taking their order, delivering the food before any other table. It's an ugly truth. It's not my choice. I'm the one who speak about it. Many restaurant owners knows that. We can read. Because we're hospitable, we're going to bring it first. That's it. Nobody want to hear that, but that's the reality.
Welcome back to the For Cultural Purposes podcast. I'm your host, Shaun James, and this is episode 5. That clip you just watched was the genesis of this episode. It isn't just about the customer service at a restaurant. It's about one of the hidden costs of our system. The math that restaurant owner is doing may feel morally questionable, but it's a calculus we all participate in and accept daily. The faster service is the outcome of an owner knowing that table turnover is the name of the game. If a table only orders entrees and waters, getting them fed and out of the door is in the best interest of his business. The blueprint for that decision-making exists at the core of the very founding of our nation and its economy, built to reward speed over care, extraction over investment, and self-preservation over community. This episode isn't about where people sit. Not really. It's about how capitalism shapes our sense of fairness, patience, and whether we can see ourselves in someone else's struggle. Before we get into the history, before we break down how we got here, let's start with right now. How the rush for right now has quietly rewritten the way we treat time, people, and ourselves. There's a poll linked at the bottom. When the title card comes up in a few seconds, pause the video and take it. Tell me what you felt immediately after watching that clip. If you've already answered the poll, thank you. If not, I hope you'll take a minute before you leave this episode to do it. We live in a country where you can Klarna your Uber Eats. You can literally borrow money to pay for a single meal. We call that convenience, but it's really a symptom of something deeper. Most of us work harder than ever, and somehow we're holding less. Now, people will tell you we've never had it better, and in a lot of ways, they're right. Food is abundant. Clean water, indoor plumbing, air conditioning, modern comforts everywhere. I'm not here to pretend none of it works. Some parts of this machine are incredibly effective. But in the richest nation on earth, most of us can't cover a $500 emergency. We've got job titles that sound like success but barely cover rent. And while regular people tighten their belts, corporations pull in billions in corporate welfare, and the people in power don't seem to mind. Capitalism doesn't require you to be cruel. It just doesn't reward patience. So over time, we've learned to sort people like math problems. Who's worth waiting on? Who's worth investing in? Who's worth slowing down for? And that sorting starts earlier than we think. Back in episode 4, we talked about how schools organize us long before we even know who we are. AP, gifted, remedial, ESL. Those little labels teach us early who's worth the extra time and who isn't. Those ideas follow us into the workplace, into healthcare, into how we decide who deserves grace and who doesn't. You can see it at the grocery store when someone counts out change and the line shifts impatiently. In a hospital waiting room when someone without good insurance gets quietly moved further down the list. In the workplace when the quiet performer gets passed over because they don't look like leadership. It feels efficient, but it's survival disguised as efficiency. And survival for a lot of people has quietly become the definition of life. But here's the thing. This wasn't an accident. We didn't wake up one morning and decide to live transactionally. This was engineered, choice by choice, election by election, policy by policy. If you want to understand the bill we're paying now, we've got to look back and see how the tab started running in the first place. To understand why you can finance a cheeseburger, you have to understand America's pace. Europe took centuries to build empires. America declared independence in 1776 and was flexing as a world power in less than 100 years. That's not just acceleration, it's warp speed. And speed like that doesn't run on dreams alone, it takes fuel. And that fuel wasn't oil or coal or even gold, it was people. Enslaved black people built the economic foundation of this country for free. Cotton, shipping, banking. Some of the same universities that lecture us today about merit were literally built by the people they wouldn't admit. After slavery, there was convict leasing. Black men freed on paper but shackled in practice. Leased, build roads, mine coal, lay railroads. States and corporations got rich while those men died in the fields. Sharecroppers, black and white, were locked in a cycle of debt that kept them working in the same land they didn't own. Irish immigrants dug canals, laid tracks, and mined coal, discarded when they demanded rights. Chinese laborers blasted through mountains for the Transcontinental Railroad, then met the Chinese Exclusion Act when the job was done. Japanese immigrants farmed the West until World War II, when their land and livelihoods were seized and they were thrown into internment camps. Poor white Appalachians went underground for coal, trading lungs and lifespans for a paycheck that rarely outlived them. It's the same three-step cycle over and over. Use human labor, discard it, rewrite history so it sounds like progress. And that cycle didn't end in the history books. Look around. The people doing the labor most Americans won't, picking crops, cleaning hotel rooms, gutting meat and processing plants, are often immigrants, many undocumented, many children. We don't celebrate that labor, we criminalize it. That's not a glitch, it's the next chapter of the same playbook. Now imagine the kind of guy who's never truly had to struggle, the one whose dad cuts him a 7-figure starter check, or whose last name is basically a golden key to venture capital meetings. When your safety net is your surname, patience is optional, structure is optional. You don't have to understand the slow grind of building something stable because you've never needed to. America was that guy, and sometimes we elect who we are. We weren't going to slow down for universal health care or a fair tax code. Those require patience, planning, trust, and shared sacrifice. We were built on a sales pitch of personal responsibility. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Don't expect help. And layered under that is our original origin story. A bunch of British rebels fleeing taxation. So when the bill comes due for public goods, it feels like someone's coming for our DNA. By the time Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, the pivot was complete. The dollar no longer needed to be backed by anything tangible. Wealth could now be manufactured out of credit and debt. In an economy already built on extraction, that made the exploitation even easier to hide. The chains weren't iron anymore. They were 30-year mortgages, payday loans, medical bills with more zeros than your bank account. Unions, once strong enough to help a family survive a strike, now whittled down until most people can't afford to miss a week's paycheck. That's not an accident, it's strategy. From there, the decades pressed harder on the gas. Reagan and his tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, union busting, Clinton with NAFTA, shipped jobs overseas, and the repeal of Glass-Steagall loosened the guardrails on banking. 2008, all that deregulated finance tanked the housing market. Banks got bailed out, and families got foreclosure notices. In recent years, we've seen even more corporate tax cuts and wealth pooling at the top. I want to just take a minute to point out that there are people that got rich because our economy failed in 2008. We have reached a point in the game where people losing their homes is a good thing for someone else. There have been studies that show when unemployment increases by just 1%, anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 people die because of increased suicide rates, inability to pay for food, and the stress that comes with not being able to afford your existence. Anyway, we didn't just build capitalism, we built speed capitalism, a system that treats efficiency not as greed but as survival. And just like that restaurant owner from the clip, most people inside it aren't villains. They're just running the play the country drew up centuries ago, one where slowing down feels like losing. When you build a nation this fast on this much extraction, you need myths to hold it together. You need people to believe the game is fair and that hard work alone can get you anything you want. I recently saw an Anthony Mackie interview on the Pivot podcast. He was promoting Captain America: Brave New World. Solid movie, by the way, 7 out of 10. He talked about his long road to playing Captain America, how he's worked across roles, hustled for years, produced projects, he's done TV and Broadway, and yet he knew people who got further faster despite putting in less work. His point was simple. We lie to kids when we tell them hard work is enough. The truth, the system isn't designed for everyone to win. And that's not an accident, it's the architecture. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine if everyone who loved coffee opened their own version of Starbucks. People love to say, if everyone worked hard, we could all be successful. But that doesn't make sense. If everyone owned the coffee shop, who's farming the beans? Who's roasting them? Who's transporting them? Who's pouring the coffee and processing the transaction? The chain works because people fill different roles, but every role should come with dignity, a living wage, healthcare, and access to education. And even if you make all that fair, there will still be more have-nots than haves. That imbalance isn't automatically evil. What's wrong is pretending the gap is natural, inevitable, or deserved. Representation often gets pulled into that illusion. Ralph Lauren's collaborations with HBCUs and Oak Bluffs, the historically black part of Martha's Vineyard, are marketed as celebrations, black excellence wrapped in linen and legacy. But putting black before capitalism doesn't solve the problems of capitalism. And while I have no problem with celebrating this black enclave that has produced multiple generations of success and excellence, in 2022, the median black household still had less than 1/6 the wealth of the median white household. If all we do is swap the faces at the table while keeping the number of chairs the same, we haven't changed the math. Part of why we accept this is kind of a societal Stockholm syndrome, where people defend the very systems that hold them down because they've been taught it's the only way. It's the same logic that had miners opposing unions that would have saved their lungs, or sharecroppers defending landowners who kept them in debt. Today it's minimum wage workers arguing against universal health care, folks barely making rent defending billionaire tax breaks, not because they're cruel, but because they've been told that helping someone else means losing something themselves. It's the same logic I talked about with the clean your chicken theory from episode 3. Doing something that feels like it's protecting you, when in reality it changes nothing. We cling to these habits and beliefs because they're familiar, even if they leave us just as exposed. Real protection would mean cooking the chicken, solving the actual problem, rather than scrubbing it in cold water and calling it safe. If the table stays the same size, scarcity will always be the outcome. And when scarcity is baked into the system, the myth of hard work is enough isn't just a lie, it's the marketing. The cost of capitalism isn't just in dollars. It shows up in bodies, in relationships, in the stories we tell ourselves to survive our exhaustion. Far too many of our elders are getting by on nothing but Social Security and part-time jobs. Decades of loyalty to companies that don't even exist anymore. They did everything right, worked hard, stayed honest, and somehow retirement means clocking in again, just to make ends meet. That's the small print of the American dream, a lifetime of labor, and for too many, nothing to show for it. And then you have stories like Michael Beasley, drafted second overall in 2008, 11 NBA seasons, around $34 million in NBA salary, not counting overseas money. And yet during one of those years, still playing at the highest level, he quietly lived out of his car. He did an interview recently where he said, "My stomach was growling, and tomorrow came and I couldn't let the sun beat me." This isn't just about money management. It's extraction in another form. The weight of having to take care of everyone because you're the first one to make it. He talked about calling the same people who took from him when he was struggling, and they wouldn't pick up. And it's not just Beasley. Toni Braxton sold over 70 million records, won 7 Grammys, and still filed for bankruptcy twice. Not because she didn't work hard, but because of the industry exploitation, predatory contracts, and hidden fees that bled her dry. She performed through illness, kept touring to meet obligations, all while knowing that most of the money was going anywhere but her pocket. Even superstardom wasn't enough to protect her from a system that takes more than it gives. For many of us who have been the first to be successful in our families, saying no doesn't feel like protecting yourself. It feels like punishing the people you love. How many times could your mom ask you for rent or mortgage money before you'd tell her no? Before you'd risk her being on the street or having to come live with you? What about that uncle who always just needs a little help, but somehow always needs it? How many times would you say yes before you'd have to say no? Would you or could you ever say no? In a country with a thin safety net, when one of us makes it, we don't just carry our dreams. We carry our entire families. The emotional toll of saying yes can be as heavy as the financial toll. The emotional toll of saying no can break you too. If you've been with me since episode 1, I hope the foundation of this podcast is clear to you. I'm not telling you this is all bad. I'm holding up a mirror to how we got here and what is keeping us here. The concessions we make for the sake of convenience and what feels like safety are ultimately what give power to this system. The cost of capitalism isn't just in the math, it's in the culture we've built to keep it running. We've learned to play the game without asking who made the rules and who benefits when we follow. So, I imagine right now, with all of this, you're all wondering, well, Shaun, what the hell do we do now? I get it. because this shit does feel hopeless sometimes. I'd say try this. Before the next episode, have one conversation that scares you. Take up space in a moment where you'd normally shrink. Call out something you know is intellectually dishonest. Push back in a way you usually wouldn't. And if you're already thinking, yeah, but it's not the right time, that's exactly why you need to do it. Because if you're just gonna nod along, chuckle, and let it slide, then nothing I've said here matters. You'll keep coasting, the system will keep running, and when the bill comes due, you won't just hate what's on it. You'll hate knowing that you helped pay for it. If you haven't taken the poll pinned at the bottom, I'd ask that you do it now, because I know once you close this episode, it'll be out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, and I get that. While you're at it, please like and subscribe. I'm currently working on episode 6, and I think that'll be the last episode of this season. I assure you there's so much more to come, but I want to take some time to get some inspiration first, but also have a few episodes in the tuck so that when we come back, I have such large gaps, because I know you guys are looking forward to the next one. But go take up some space. I'll see you next time.